Hi, just to remind you what we did previously, I drew this picture that shows four-step process. First, we did first we created some files and folders with the file manager. This is our folder with files and folder in it. Then we moved to github.com as an alternative to manage files and folders not on the local machine, not on the local computer, but on the internet. And we created a repository there. Let me show you. Here's our github.com and here's our repository. Our folder and files, as you can see, very similar to local file manager, only it's located on the internet, so everyone can use it, can access it. This was our second step, and third step was Github Desktop is another application. It's not a browser application, it's outside of browser. And with this application we did the same thing. Here's our repository, and we can view it in our file manager. And why we moved from github.com to GitHub Desktop? Because GitHub Desktop has additional functionality. It allows us to work with our local file system and then push our folder to github.com. So we have a simplistic way of working with files, like with the editor of our choice. And actually in GitHub Desktop you can click open the file, open in our text editor. You can edit files right in your local folder, in your local file system, and then view them on GitHub. So it was all in previous part, and I mentioned previously that the next step that I want to talk about is Git, because previously we used UI based interface, but to really understand Git you need to try Git itself, because all of these github.com and GitHub Desktop is just wrappers around Git, and you click on some buttons like committing to master, viewing on GitHub, or viewing history, but inside these application calls Git commands and just shows you the result. So maybe it's better to actually use Git itself, at least to understand what it can and what it cannot do, and then maybe select what closer to you. And to show you, to give you some idea of how to use Git, let's start easy. Let's try to simulate the same simple scenarios we did previously with creating some files and folders and then pushing everything to remote repository located on GitHub, and then we'll see how it looks in our browser. So let's start, and to use Git we need a terminal, because it's terminal based command line tool. You use it by writing git commands, and if you click enter you'll get what's called a help message with all available commands. And let's do simple scenarios in parallel. First in GitHub Desktop, because we previously used it, and then we do the same command in terminal with Git. Let's start from creating a new repository. To do that, as we did previously, click Add, set the name of the repository. Let's call it, I don't know, simple repository. Skip all these options, click Create. Here's our simple repository with one automatically committed change, and this is basically an empty repository. To do the same operation with Git, you type git help and you are looking for this command, git init. You don't need to always look at the help message, because with time you will remember them and it will be automatic. I don't use help at all. I just want to share to show you that it's possible to view all of them here. So you need to create a folder, make dir simple repository 1 and move to this directory, and this will be the base for our repository. Now run git init to initialize this repository, and now this is basically the same empty repository. You type git log. It says that we don't have any commits. Well, we have one commit in our GitHub Desktop, only because it was committed by the application itself. If we use a plain Git, it doesn't commit anything by default, so we don't have any history here. But now let's open first let's open our repository, simple repository, and then we'll do the same operation with simple repository 1. Let's open it with our editor, and as previously, create some folders, quickly create some folders in it, and files, file 1 with content, then folder, file inside the folder. That's it. That's enough. We close editor, and now we have two changes. As you can see, we can select and deselect changes. This way we add specific files to the commit. Not all of them. We can skip some files. For example, we made a lot of changes but only want to commit some of them, or maybe we want to create several commits just to separate changes from one feature to another. But now and as you can see, they are selected by default. All the changes are selected and ready to be committed. So let's set some message here. Add simple structure, commit a change, and in history you have one additional commit. With Git you do exactly the same things. First you create files. In this case, let me use another editor that's called Vim. With Vim you create file with this command, with content, and then I just save the file, and let's create another file, file 2, with another content, and also maybe let's create a directory, and file inside this directory with content. I closed the editor, and now we have this structure. We can display it like so to easily see the folder and nested file. So what now? As you remember, now we should see the changes. To view the changes, you need to type status. And what status is, it shows a working tree status, and basically it shows changes. So you type status and you see all the changes that were made. We created a file, another file, and folder. And by default, as I previously said, in GitHub Desktop we have all the changes selected. A red color here means that they're not selected. To select these changes for grouping them into one commit, we need to run git add dot command. Dot means select everything. Select everything in current directory, and all of these files are on current directory. For example, if we first go to folder 1, just for you to understand, and here we type git status, you see double dot slash and then file. It means that this file is located in parent directory. And now if we type git add dot, we won't add these files, we only add a current directory. So we click enter, and now if we type git status, we have a new file, and these files are not yet added because, as you remember, we only add a current folder. Just for you to understand what dot means, let's move to the parent directory and add a current directory to selected list of files. Well, actually, let me show you another option. Maybe okay, so let me try to go back here. Changes to be committed. Let me undo the last step I did with the command cached. For example, here I undone this file. It means that I deselected, and I can select it not by providing a dot syllable but by a file name, like so. And now if you check the file git status, you see all the files are added, and it shows you the command that you need to do to unstage it. Basically, unstage and stage is similar to select and deselect. Anyway, we have all our files selected, and now we need to commit. To have a commit, to make a commit, you need this command, git commit. And basically I remember all of them, and with time you will also remember, and sometimes, as you can see, git itself will help you to remember the commands. So git commit, it will record changes to the repository. Basically it accepts our commit. Git status one more time, and we do it like so: git commit -m. -m meaning we provide the message for our commit. This is similar to this input here over here. You provide some information, some message, some summary here, like the same we did previously at test structure. We type enter. Now if we check git status, we don't have anything because well, as with GitHub Desktop, we don't have any changes after we committed them. In history, to view the history in Git, we type git log, and here's our only commit with our message, and there is some extra information over here also. So what's next? We committed our change to local repository. Now we want to publish it. So we click the publish button as we did in previous part. Let it be the default name. We don't want it to be private. We click publish button. And after several seconds should be ready, and we will be able to see it in our browser. Let's wait. Okay, and now let's go to the browser and see it. See the repository. Here's our structure. Here's our history with a single commit. Okay, this is GitHub Desktop, but what about how we do it with Git? In Git we have this. We need to do some things manually, because Git does not create a repository in GitHub by default. Why? Well, because there are a lot of sites like GitHub, and Git works with all of them. However, GitHub Desktop doesn't work, only works with github.com, so it knows by default that it should create a repository in github.com and nowhere else. So it doesn't even ask us where exactly we want to create a repository. With Git, it's a little bit different, because there are other sites like gitbucket.org, right? You can create, and they're similar. Both of them doing the same stuff. They all share the same operations. They all host repositories, and yeah, you need to create your repository manually and then point a local folder, local repository, to whatever place you create it for, and say to Git where you want to push this repository. So let's quickly create a repository, new repository, simple repository 1, won't give any description, create a repository, and here is the instruction on how to set our local repository to push to use this remote repository. And yeah, we have already created some files. We initialized the repository, we add the commit. We have already done that. This is the important step. We select, and what it does is it sets an origin. Origin is a name that our repository should point to. It just named, so it could be anything. And to prove it, let me actually change the origin to anything, to any name. It could be anything, like GitHub 1, for example. It could be any name. Let it be GitHub 1. We click enter, and then we push our local repository to remote repository. Of course, we need to change origin to GitHub 1. Click enter, Yeah, and now we need to provide the username and password, because as you can remember in GitHub Desktop at first startup we did provide these credentials, and because Git could use different sites like GitHub and Bitbucket. It doesn't ask you for credentials from the beginning, because each of the site has a separate account. So you should provide credentials when you push, and not at the very beginning, because there could be a lot of accounts. Anyway, let me provide my credentials. This is my login, and this is my password. Okay. Okay, it failed. Invalid username and password. Yeah, maybe I did. Okay, I think that I copied this one, but I need this one. I don't remember which one I need. Let me try both. Strange, it works this time. Interesting. Anyway, we pushed the repository, the local repository to remote, and now if we reload the page, we see our structure here. And so we read this scenario with both GitHub Desktop and Git, and it's you who needs to decide what is the correct way of using Git. I prefer to use Git command line tool. Maybe you will prefer, maybe at the beginning of the journey you will prefer GitHub Desktop and then move to Git, and you can go with both of them at the same time and use them as in parallel. Maybe you work only with Git, and if you have any problems, you might switch to GitHub Desktop and go from it. Go from that point on with GitHub Desktop. Well, everything depends on you. What's your preference? And so this is basically the last step on understanding Git, and the main idea that I want to show you here, that Git isn't that different from file manager, and that you can do all the flow with github.com and don't even need to go further in this process. Everything could be done with github.com. It's not that comfortable as with GitHub Desktop or Git, and basically that it's simple to start using Git from the very first step, and maybe it's much more comfortable with Git, but everyone could be done with github.com. During these videos I didn't dive deep into some more detailed features of Git, and only mentioned the very basic ones like committing and pushing and creating a repository, but there are much more, and maybe I will talk about them later. But for now, just start using it, and the features that I described about Git, it's enough for you to start using Git. Just start using it, start practicing it, and go from there. That's it for now.